The village of Bambari rested peacefully amidst the lush rainforests of Central Africa. Thatched mud huts dotted the landscape, connected by winding dirt paths worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. Women tended cooking fires outside their homes, chatting lightly as they prepared the day's meals. Inside the huts, men carved tools and women wove baskets, passing down generations of craftsmanship. Children laughed and played simple games with rocks and sticks. This remote village had lived in harmony with the forest for as long as anyone could remember. They hunted only what they needed, thanked the animals they killed, and protected the mighty trees that shaded their home. The villagers were especially careful not to anger the great apes that dwelled nearby. Though they occasionally had conflicts, overall there was balance. One day, a group of hunters from Bambari tracked a family of gorillas through the dense jungle. They were hoping to capture a baby gorilla to sell to a zookeeper in the city. As the silverback male charged to protect his troop, the men opened fire with their rifles. The gorilla fell dead to the forest floor as the rest of the apes scattered in terror. The hunters grabbed the wailing baby and made off with their valuable prize. When the other gorillas returned, they found their great leader slain. The females shrieked and beat their chests in anguish. The enraged males roared and snapped branches off of trees. They knew exactly who was responsible. The murder of their silverback alpha could not go unpunished. The gorillas began planning their revenge. They stalked the edges of Bambari, spying on the routines of the villagers. They remembered which humans had violated their territory before. Slowly, patiently, they plotted an attack. Matto whistled cheerfully as he trekked through the rainforest. As Bambari's best hunter, he was charged with providing meat for the village elders' upcoming feast. He checked the snares he had laid the day before, pleased to find several fat rabbits captured. After resetting the snares, Mario pushed deeper into the jungle in search of bushbuck or kudu. The familiar sounds of the forest surrounded him, insects droning, birds calling, leaves rustling. He was so focused on tracking an antelope trail that he didn't notice the forest go quiet until it was too late. The heavy weight hit Mario from behind, slamming him to the ground and driving the air from his lungs. He gasped desperately as a hairy arm encircled his throat. Hot breath blasted his face. Mario struggled violently, but the creature was too strong. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. He felt himself losing consciousness. But just before he blacked out, the pressure on his neck suddenly released. Coughing and wheezing, Mario spun around to confront his attacker. To his shock, no one was there. The jungle was empty and quiet once again. Shaken, Mario grabbed his dropped machete and sprinted back to the village. He burst into the elder's hut, breathing hard. Mario described the stealthy assault, still trembling with fear and confusion. Why had the beast let him live? The elder's face was grim. You are fortunate to have escaped with your life. This was a warning from the forest spirits. You must perform purification rituals and beg their forgiveness. Matteo nodded weakly. He had never believed in spirits before, but now a shadow of doubt crept into his mind. What if the elder was right? Had he offended the guardian spirits of the forest? Matteo resolved to heed the omen and curb his hunting until the spirits were appeased. But he would soon learn. It would take much more than rituals to call off the coming attack. Over the next week, the gorillas continued to terrorize Bambari. Sometimes they stayed hidden in the foliage, never fully emerging to confront the villagers face to face. But their presence was felt all the same. Huts were ransacked, with the great apes smashing holes right through the mud brick walls. Women screamed as gorillas charged from the forest, banging their chests aggressively before disappearing again. Men on hunting trips were beaten and chased through the jungle. Livestock was killed or carried off. No one felt safe to venture far from the village center. The local medicine man attempted to communicate with the angry spirits, making sacrifices and burning incense. But his rituals only seemed to anger them more. The attacks increased in frequency and violence. It was clear the villagers were under siege. Frightened debates raged into the night about how to appease the forest guardians. The elder finally declared that Bambari would perform a village-wide ceremony, slaughtering 10 goats and oxen to honor the spirits. They hurried to prepare, praying it would be enough. But the guerrillas had no interest in ceremonies or sacrifice. Their fury could not be easily mollified. They were determined that the humans would suffer as they had suffered. Bambari had taken one of their own, and now they would have their revenge. On the appointed day, the people of Bambari gathered in their sacred clearing in the center of the village. The 10 animals were tethered to posts lined with garlands of jungle flowers. The villagers sang and chanted, burning sweet grasses and fragrant woods. The smoke rose through the trees like a mass plea for peace. But the guerrillas were not interested in peace. As the elder raised his ceremonial dagger to slit the first goat's throat, a thunderous crash echoed from the jungle's edge. The people shrieked in terror as a huge silverback gorilla tore out of the foliage, heading straight for them. More angry bellows rang out as 6 more enormous males stampeded behind their leader. Chaos erupted in the village. Everyone dropped their offerings and ran, desperate to escape the charging apes. Mothers snatched up infants and small children, fleeing for the perceived safety of their huts. But there would be no sanctuary there. The guerrillas were coming for blood. The guerrillas fanned out through the village with frightening coordination, demolishing everything in sight. They tore thatch from roofs, smashed pots, and ripped doors from huts. When they found hiding villagers, they beat them violently, gravely injuring or killing many. The village filled with guttural roars, screams of terror, and sounds of destruction. No one could escape the whirlwind of violence. The traumatized villagers huddled together after the apes finally moved on, damage done. Few huts still stood, the rest were reduced to rubble. Fires smoldered where cooking pits and ceremonial pyres had been overturned. Broken bodies lay battered and moaning. Bambari had suffered a massacre at the hands of the enraged guerrillas. Why had they turned so viciously against people they had lived alongside for generations? The villagers were confused and heartbroken. But the elder only shook his head sadly, for he understood. "We brought this upon ourselves," he said gravely. "We broke the peace between us and the great apes. Now they have retribution." There was nothing left to do but abandon the ruined village and start anew somewhere safer. The survivors gathered what they could carry and began the sorrowful journey away from their devastated home. They prayed that somehow, someday, balance could be restored. Life grew increasingly hard for the exiles of Bambari. With so many injured and killed, there were fewer hands to build shelters, forage for food, and care for the group. Their new settlement seemed barren compared to their lost home, with predators continually hounding them. Each time they began constructing a permanent village, warning rumbles came from the jungle. The great apes stalked them mercilessly, destroying their structures and supplies. They came mostly at night, silent as ghosts, picking off lone villagers who strayed too far from the group. Each morning there were new bodies. Food became dangerously scarce. The humans were too afraid to hunt, knowing guerrillas could track them. Attempts at farming yielded little. The apes uprooted any cultivated plants. Weak and emaciated, they foraged what they could, contending with sickness and starvation. They never stayed long in one area, fleeing at the first sign of guerrilla aggression. The nomads wandered the rainforest aimlessly, searching for a peaceful place to permanently settle. But the guerrillas always found them, seemingly determined to erase any trace of human habitation. Many began wondering if the creatures intended to wipe out their very existence. Perhaps this curse would end only when the last human from Bambari perished under the apes' fury. Their future looked bleak indeed. It was clear the guerrillas would permit no further intrusion into their domain. Why they refused to share the vast rainforest was a mystery. The villagers held council, debating how to appease the angry guardian spirits who had turned against them. The elder finally suggested a humble delegation to beg for mercy. It was their last resort, but their only hope for survival. They all prayed the offering would be accepted and harmony restored. Several elders slowly approached a group of gorillas foraging in the jungle. They bore gifts of precious seed pods as offerings of peace, making submissive grunts and gestures. The men gingerly placed the gifts at the silverback's feet, then bowed in respect. The great ape glared, rising to his full imposing height. He beat his chest and roared as the other gorillas formed a hostile circle around the trembling men. They closed in with angry grunts, ready to attack. "Please, great ones," an elder cried. "We know now we violated the sacred balance. But must more blood be spilled before amends are made?" He fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the ground. The other men quickly did the same in a show of capitulation. They lay helpless at the gorilla's feet awaiting judgment. The silverback grunted harshly at the prostrate men, stomping the earth. But to the human's relief, no blows came. After long tense moments, the apes slowly backed away and resumed foraging. Their meaning was clear. Your presence is still unwelcome, but we grant you life today. The elders remained long after the apes had gone, giving thanks for this chance. Though the creatures showed no true change of heart, for now at least there was hope. They returned to their people and described what happened, faces alight with fragile optimism. But the chief elder only shook his head sadly. "This changes nothing. We have not been forgiven, merely shown unwilling mercy. Our exile continues." Still, the people dared hope that continued shows of humility would one day appease the forest gods. With strict adherence to the old ways, perhaps balance could slowly be restored. They prayed for the day they might live as one with the jungle once again. Many months had passed since the gorilla attack, and no more violence had come. Though surviving was a daily struggle, the exiled villagers became cautiously optimistic. Perhaps the apes had finally sated their vengeance. When men encountered gorillas on rare hunting forays, they bowed submissively until the great beasts moved on. The people made burnt offerings from their meager food stores to honor the forest spirits. Everyone took care not to anger the supernatural guardians who apparently hid inside the animals. Life went on, to the extent it could. Small shelters were erected, crops planted in hidden clearings, simple tools fashioned. They were still nomadic, ready to flee instantly. But they established some sort of tenuous coexistence with the forest dwellers. As long as balance was maintained, there was now begrudging tolerance. The chief elder, though, remained unconvinced. He still felt uneasy living at the mercy of such powerful spirits. One misstep could bring punishment again. There must be some way to permanently make amends. After long study of the ancient ways, he called a council meeting. "We still do not understand their ways," he told the people. "We must commune with the earth and sky as they do. Only by becoming one with the forest can we regain harmony." They knew he spoke wisdom. Thus the villagers redoubled their efforts to integrate themselves into the natural world. They performed long rituals honoring the spirits, burning sacred plants. The people ate only what the jungle provided and used all parts of hunted animals. They took nothing more than needed and cleaned kills reverently. Gradually, the mistrust between men and apes began to lessen. Gifts of seeds were accepted. Youngsters could observe gorilla troops peacefully. There seemed to be acknowledgement that both species belonged in the rainforest. The balance had been restored. As years passed, the villagers and the gorillas continued their tranquil coexistence. The people kept to their roles as humble stewards of the jungle, and the great apes became the undisputed lords of their domain once again. Harmony reigned in the isolated corner of rainforest that both called home.